Dear friends, how are you doing today? I'm Mark Golub, so happy to be with you again. And turning aside for a moment from our health concerns, we can actually say, in the news, a moment for celebration in the state of Israel, as Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz have actually and finally agreed to form a unity coalition, with Mr. Netanyahu serving as prime minister for the first year and a half, to then be replaced by Benny Gantz as prime minister. Now, not everyone predicted this would be the ultimate turn of events. There were many who said Israel is headed for a fourth round of elections, since neither Likud nor Blue and White could muster the required 61-seat majority to form a coalition government. But here on JBS, one voice remains steadfast in predicting that Netanyahu and Gantz would find a way to work together. And he stuck his neck out here on JBS. He's JBS's senior vice president, former media consul for the Israeli consulate in New York, Shahar Azani, who joins us now. Shahar, kol hakavod to you. You stuck your neck out, and you've been proven correct.
Thank you very much, Mark. Pleasure to be with you and with our JBS viewers. And what's life without a little bit of fun?
Exactly. Okay, Shahar, let's go through some of the specific issues. And I'd like you to comment on some of the criticisms coming out of Israel of this unity government. But first, walk us through the last couple of days. What really happened and what really brought Netanyahu and Gantz to decide to work together?
Well, there are two elements here, Mark, and I'd like to differentiate. One is I'll reference exactly what you just said the last couple of days, and another one just looking at it from a wider perspective of a longer period of time. The last couple of days has seen increased pressure on the government from many local small business owners who are suffering tremendously as a result of the economic crisis brought about by the coronavirus crisis. Now, specifically, there was an incident the day before the signing of this agreement with a falafel shop in the southern city of Ashdod in Israel, where there was an interview with the shop owner who was literally crying on camera, complaining that he's unable to feed his family, his children, that the orders of the government are unclear. So he came that day to open shop because he believed he was able to start running his business, and then for the police only to come and fine him or ask him to close shop. And at the same time, when he was asked what's up with the loans for small businesses the government is providing, he said, well, if judging by the TV, I'm a millionaire, but I have nothing. And he opens his wallet and he shows a couple of notes and says, that's all I have. And the poor people who worked for me before Passover, I can't even pay them. His video went viral across Israel. His authentic and truly touching cry reached Jerusalem as well. And there were there was an incredible Israeli-style, proper Jewish outpouring of support for the guy. You were seeing people buying virtual falafel bowls online just to support him. A woman who came and bought 300 portions of falafel so that she can support the medical staff at the nearby hospital. It was Israel at its best, really at its best. But these voices reached Jerusalem. The Benny Gantz, who went on this adventure and who took tremendous risk, by the way, as you mentioned, the criticism, and we'll reference that later on, and Benjamin Netanyahu, who understood that even though some polls may be flattering him at this point in time in maybe attaining the majority he's always dreamt of, 2 more months of this, 3 more months of cries on TV, cries at demonstrations calling for his resignation as a result of economic mismanagement of the crisis, things are not going to be so rosy. And he's a shrewd politician. Looking at it from a grander perspective, what were our options? One option would be for Gantz to strive for a narrow government, the 61 government, the one that they were trying to establish as the biggest bloc, as the bigger bloc was still in existence with Yair Lapid of Yesh Atid and with Bogi Ya'alon, and that was unsuccessful, but was also very much undesirable by the Israeli public. On the Likud side, Netanyahu could dream of having more defectors coming from the blue and white bloc, but that was very low chances of that happening. And again, the public sentiment was not there. And the fourth round of elections, even though some people were even vying for it in the hope, you're like in the casino, and you're hoping that this time it's going to work. Just give me one more chance and I'm going to get it done. And to me, what happened, even if it's not the best thing ever, it's the best out of everything we've had.
So which one, Gantz or Netanyahu, had to compromise more to make this happen? Because the last time we spoke, you explained to us the extent to which both men were between a rock and a hard place. So at some point, both of them had to give up something. Who had to give up more? How was the compromise made?
On that issue, I'll tell you what's the best way to judge a compromise or a national unity government is to look and see who is criticizing it and how much criticism is there out there. And perfectly Israel, again, a huge amount of criticism. And thankfully for us, from the right and from the left. And when you look at this agreement, there are issues for both people, both for Benny Gantz and for Benjamin Netanyahu. If you look at Benny Gantz, who supposedly, according to some of the criticisms, betrayed his electorate, agreed to sit with Benjamin Netanyahu even though he was criminally indicted, legitimizing the person that bloc came to be in order to depose from the prime ministerial position, sharing responsibilities, giving majority on some of the committees, the ability to make decisions. This is an equal government, Mark. This means that each and every decision, and especially the significant one, has to be made with agreement between the two parties. In essence, according to the criticism, it gives Netanyahu a veto on everything that supposedly the blue and white bloc would want to promote. Having said that, on the right, Benjamin Netanyahu, like we said before, for the first time in many years, signed his own expiration date. Benjamin Netanyahu, in his own voice a few weeks ago on TV, and with his own hand only yesterday, signed the agreement of him leaving the prime minister's position. Isn't that what the blue and white bloc was created for? To see an end to Netanyahu's rule and to revamp the Israeli political system? In addition, nobody's talking about Naftali Bennett. Nobody's mentioning Yamina or Ayelet Shaked, who was only a few months ago a stellar politician and a star in the Israeli political skies. Why is that? Because the right wing also has issues with this agreement, because they blame Netanyahu for compromising too much towards Benny Gantz, who only came with 17 members of the Knesset, and now he's equal to the 59 bloc that Netanyahu has. 59, I say, because Orly Levy Abukassis, whose name we mentioned even at that post-election show in March, many, many eons ago, she is going to be part of that right-wing bloc. And from what I'm hearing, she's even going to be a minister. So compromises were made. This was a complicated agreement, a hefty agreement with many clauses, a lot of judicial intervention, legal advice came into it, but it's the best that could be achieved at this point to bring Israel back from the brink after wasting billions of shekels on elections and elections and elections, and try to steer the ship back to some sort of normalcy. And to that, I think we should all be very pleased. As you mentioned at the beginning, a real reason to celebrate.
All right, there are those on the left that I have read who, again, as you say, they're just bashing Gantz for caving. And they claim that Gantz was saying he had to do this because of the pandemic, and that the pandemic was also forcing the compromise to be necessary. And the left says there was zero relationship to the global tragedy of the pandemic to this compromise. From your perspective, to what extent And again, you talked about this video, but if there had been no video, would you have been proven wrong, Shahar? Or do you think this unity government was going to happen whether there was that video or not? And was it predicated on larger necessities and issues than the COVID-19 problem?
Yes, Mark, exactly as you said. First of all, the video was definitely a catalyst to rush things forward, but it was by no means the reason because of which the agreement came about. There were grander reasons. Benny Gantz, think about the criticism for a minute, and let's look at the opposition. And again, it's not me making a political stand, just looking at the reality objectively. You can either stand on the podium and cry your lungs out or actually engage in governance, because politics is the art of compromise. If you're interested to touch the steering wheel and actually exert influence, more than just the occasional tweet, more than just a Facebook post, more than just a courageous speech on the Knesset floor, actually get your hands dirty and work. That, yes, will get you criticized, in which you're going to make mistakes, but you're also going to be able to make a difference. And that's the reason why Gantz and Ashkenazi joined the political scene. They wanted to make a difference, not just be the perpetual candidates in never-ending elections and ever-growing friction within the people. Now, I just want to mention a few things that I think our viewers would appreciate to hear, just to understand what the basic principles of the agreements are. First of all, this is an equal government. So Gantz with his 17, with the Bibi Netanyahu's bloc with 59, will have the same numbers of ministers, including the small sections. You have the cabinet, whether it's the political security cabinet or the economic social cabinet. And in each and every one of those cabinets that manage the day-to-day affairs on those relevant issues to the Israeli economy and society, they're going to have equal sitting.
Okay, and in the first year and a half, what will Gantz's role be?
So the system that was established was that the government that's going to be sworn in right when they're done with the legislation relevant for this, you're going to swear in two prime ministers at the same time. Prime Minister Netanyahu as a presiding prime minister, and blue and white chairperson Benny Gantz as an intended prime minister to assume position, as we said, probably in October of 2021, a year and a half, 18 months into the term of this government. Now, as far as the actual work that's going to be done, in addition to managing the social, economic, and the political security affairs, there's going to be a coronavirus entity, a cabinet of ministers that's going to be co-led. So far, we've seen only Netanyahu. Co-led by Netanyahu and Gantz to take care of the economic issues and beyond that pertain to the coronavirus crisis. And that is extremely important. In addition, the agreement stipulates that what's being established now is not immediately a national unity government. It's an emergency government for the next 6 months, after which it's going to be called a national unity government. What's the difference?
Yeah, what's the significance of that?
So the meaning is the focus of the emergency government is going to be the coronavirus crisis. It's going to be dealing with the social implications, school, healthcare, small businesses, the economy, society as a result, and hopefully post-crisis. And in the course of the term of the emergency government, no significant acts of legislation that have nothing to do with the coronavirus are to be enacted. They're kind of postponing some of the major issues 6 months ahead to allow this government to come together, coalesce, and start dealing with the crisis, and not only and for me to see somebody in addition to Benjamin Netanyahu, I believe, should give relief to anybody who wanted to see a change in Israel. After 6 months, the government will become a national unity government. That's going to be a legitimate, regular government that's going to deal with all of the issues on the table. And while dealing with these issues, it has to be an agreement between the two blocks. Now, there is another party in the blue and white bloc, Labor Party. We mentioned in our discussions, Mark, the glory days of 1992 when Labor and Meretz were 52 members of Knesset. And now Labor, because they parted way with Meretz would never join this government. But Labor, with Amir Peretz, actually is joining this government. Now, Labor has three, that's the number three, members of Knesset, two of whom are going to be joining this government, both of whom are going to be ministers. One of them, Amir Peretz, is going to be the Minister of Economic Affairs, and the younger one, Itzik Shmuli, is going to be Minister of Welfare. That is a huge achievement for them. The third member of Knesset, Merav Michaeli, a woman who was very much against Netanyahu and the coalition, is going to stay out. It's an amazing reality. And I think that we should all be relieved that we're not going to dive into billions of shekels waste of fourth round of elections.
Okay. By the way, who is likely to be foreign minister? Who is likely to be defense minister?
So as far as the portfolios that are being held, just to give our viewers a sense of the partition, Likud is maintaining its control of the Ministry of Finance for the entire duration of the government, both emergency and national unity. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is going to be partitioned. The first year and a half, it's going to be Gabi Ashkenazi, the number two man in blue and white, under Benny Gantz. And the second year and a half, it's going to be held by one of the Likud ministers. The Minister of Defense, for the beginning at least, it's going to be Benny Gantz until he assumes position as prime minister in a year and a half, at which point Netanyahu will assume that senior role.
Okay, then what will Gantz be doing in the first year and a half?
Well, Minister of Defense is a full-time job. Not only Minister of Defense, he's
also going to... Is Gantz going to be Minister of Defense?
Yeah, Gantz is going to be Benny Gantz in the first year and a half. Gabi Ashkenazi is Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Benny Gantz is Minister of Defense.
I see.
While Netanyahu is Prime Minister, and blue and white are holding the dockets of Defense, as I said, Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Justice, Mark. How much talk has been of the Ministry of Justice and Netanyahu's control and the disagreement and the appointment of judges, and it's going to be held by blue and white, and not only by blue and white, but by Avi Nissenkorn, who was former head of the Histadrut, the Israeli Labor Union, who was very much objected to by many in the right-wing bloc for being overly excessively effective in what he does, and still he assumes that position, and he's going to be commandeering as the Minister of Justice. There is a lot of power in that system.
And what's going to happen to Netanyahu and his legal problems? He is formally under indictment. How does this arrangement in any way impact his legal problems?
Well, this is the point when we remember that whatever happens in the Israeli political scene, Netanyahu, like you're saying, Mark, has to deal with his legal issues. The indictments are there. He's supposed to appear in court in the month of May, I believe 24th. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but we'll wait and see. And he has to deal with those issues. And that will continue. However, there is another element here, which is the Supreme Court's ruling whether he's eligible to be a prime minister with pending indictments. That is separate from the actual indictments that he's going to have to deal with regardless, whatever happens.
And you're saying that this unity deal doesn't in some way make that question moot?
Well, no, because it even digs into the wound, and I'll explain. The agreement between the parties stipulates that if the Supreme Court rules that Benjamin Netanyahu is ineligible to preside as a prime minister, then blue and white commits not to strive to appoint somebody else, and they will both agree to disperse the Knesset and move to fourth round of election. So it actually puts the ball in the Supreme Court's court, where they're going to have to make a decision whose ramifications will be the disbanding of this national unity government that was such a difficult and arduous path to achieve, and move to another round of elections. This is going to be very interesting.
Okay, my instinct is that the social needs of the State of Israel and the extent to which it would be destructive to throw Israel into a fourth round of elections will move the Supreme Court, Israel's Supreme Court, not to remove Netanyahu. What are your thoughts?
I agree. I mean, listen, the agreement stipulates exactly because of that if in the course of swearing in this government and until the end of the emergency, period, which is the next 6 months, the Supreme Court there will be a petition not to allow Netanyahu to preside, and the Supreme Court will accept it. Both Likud and Blue and White commit not to propose any alternative candidate for the position of prime minister and not to support anyone else and to work together to disband the Knesset. And this order is for the next 6 months in order to deal with that issue. But I agree with you. I think that at this point in time, it's going to be interesting to see because it's transparent. For the first time, what we're seeing here in the tug of war between the different entities, the checks and balances, it's nothing behind the scenes or interpret or it's out there on the table. It's in the agreement.
Okay. By the way, explain very quickly. A government is elected for a 4-year term. If Netanyahu and Gantz are sharing the prime ministership, why is Netanyahu leaving after a year and a half rather than waiting for 2 years, serving half of the 4 years, and then stepping down? Why the year and a half, Shahar?
You're very correct, because they want the desire was to start small or to start moderately. However, the intention is and the hope is that that there will be such trust built between Gantz and Netanyahu or between the parties that will allow the government to function and live out its days up to a term, just like you say, Mark, of 4 years, in the course of which each of the candidates, both the prime minister and the intended prime minister, will receive an additional 6 months to complete the 4-year term and to go to elections actually on time. There is one more clause I have to mention, which is the prime ministerial residence. We mentioned this word Balfour, which is a street where the prime ministerial residence is. And interestingly enough, this agreement includes an alternative housing for the intended prime minister. So both the presiding prime minister will have a prime ministerial residence, but also the person who might be leaving in 18 months with their family will move to a residence of their own, which will still be a prime ministerial residence.
Okay, but what you've just told us is that it could be that this is not the last moment that we will see Benjamin Netanyahu as prime minister. There's a possibility that 3 years from now, he will have another 6 months. Did I understand you correctly?
Yes, you did. And there is, in addition to that, here is another option. Netanyahu starts to rule, and instead of finishing in 18 months, he finishes in 17 months. And he's giving the reins to Gantz. Gantz then becomes prime minister for 18 months. But you have one more month, right, before the Knesset is disbanded.
Yeah.
Netanyahu resumes position for that month, disbands the Knesset, and then he's the prime minister of the transitional government until elections are held and until another coalition is created.
Unbelievable.
I mean, to play with that cauldron in the political quagmire that Israel is amazing, which makes it so interesting and which makes us so appreciative at this point that we finally have a stable government. And now it's time to govern, to rule, to make a difference. And this is where we should focus our attention at the actual achievements of this government, because Gantz is getting something. Think about how many people tried to reach this position in the last few years and failed, Mark. Bougie Herzog, Yitzhak Herzog, who is now the head of the Jewish Agency, who came close. Tzipi Livni, who actually won an election in 2009 and wasn't able to get there. Yair Lapid, who has to look at this from the outside, and he supposedly crowned Benny Gantz and helped him and pushed him forward, and instead of being the perpetual candidate, it may be Benny Gantz, the person who everybody thought of as a political rookie who doesn't know what he's doing, and he's going to be the one who possibly maybe
it is remarkable. And by the way, you have been with us every step of the way on this journey, and again, kol hakavod. It's something you insisted would happen, and you were right. But we're only at the beginning of the story, interestingly enough, Shahar. So we will continue, you and I will continue this discussion to make sure our audience here on JBS understands it as fully as possible. Beautifully and wonderfully said, as always. Thank you, my friend.
One more comment, Mark. I'll just make one more comment because this is something that everybody will hear. One of the main criticisms of the agreement is how big the government is. 32 ministers in the course of the emergency period, 36 ministers in the course of the national unity. I ask all of those people, what's that cost of a car and a driver and a secretary compared to a fourth round of elections, which would cost the Israeli market billions? It's important because sometimes people miss that fact. Thank you so much for having me, Mark, and looking forward to being on again.
Thank you, my friend. See you soon. Shahar Azani, again, no one is able to summarize and bring us the information behind the Israeli scenes as he does. I'm very, very grateful. We're looking at rough numbers for COVID-19 for April 21st. In the U.S., in the last 6 days, the number of diagnosed cases has risen to 811,000. But a bit of good news is that the rate of recovery in the United States is now above 10%, while only 5.5% of those with the disease become fatalities. In Israel, the numbers remain even better. Israel still has fewer than 14,000 diagnosed cases, and the rate of recovery in Israel has steadily grown so that it is now over 30%, while the rate of fatality in Israel remains at just 1%. So while the coronavirus is still an ominous pandemic, there's evidence that we are past its peak effects. I'm also honored to read two Yortzeit names sent to us by a JBS viewer, those of Rivka and Asher Yohai, who are remembered for good by their daughter Esther Kirkut. Zecher Tzadikim Livracha, may the memory of Rivka and Asher Yohai forever be a blessing. And remember, if there is someone whom you'd like me to mention for a Mazel Tov on a Simcha, or in a Misha Berach list mentioning those who are ill and whom we hope will be blessed with Refuah Shlema, complete healing, or if you have a Yortzeit name and no synagogue setting in which to read it, please send me those names and I will be privileged to read them here on JBS. Any information may be sent to jbscommunity@jbstv.org. And if you wish to be in touch with me directly, you can email me at rabbigolub@jbstv.org. Thanks as always to our director, Sloan Copeland. And until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Stay safe and be well, my friends.